This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. Don't miss a moment on or off the field. Make every day a highlight with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIKs.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Welcome back to the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. Friday, April 18th. Welcome in, George. Another week. Another around the quarter here on a Friday. I guess what? 3 days into the spring portal, we've done the portal shows or the portal reports here over the last couple days. Oklahoma obviously extremely active. We'll get into some of the stuff with the kicking situation with Mason Shipley, who visited on Thursday, as well as a number of items here from the Crimson Corner, taking all your questions and just kind of give it a little bit of feedback. Maybe a little bit easier to do so through spoken word than some of the written word. OU baseball with another ass whooping of Missouri on Friday afternoon in game one of the doubleheader. OU softball, they're about to start up in Oklahoma City at Devon Park. Big series with Samantha Ricketts and Mississippi State. Georgie, how are we? Good Friday to you. Actual good Friday to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Big weekend, Easter.
It is Easter.
And the Thunder playoffs. How about that? On Easter.
Do you have... Not nervous, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to start the playoffs.
I think it's more, the expectations I feel like are so high for this team.
Got to get to the finals.
You're definitely a little nervous of anything short of, reaching the finals feels like a failure.
You don't have to answer now, but I do, I would like at some point top three persons or maybe your favorite top three persons that have ever rose from the dead.
Okay. Jesus Christ is probably in the top three.
Okay. Just making sure. All right, here we go. Let's get into some of the questions from the Crimson Corner, though. A really good time to join Soonerscoop.com, where you can be a member of the biggest online community for Oklahoma fans. It's been very active, as one would expect. The transfer portal thread, always one of the big hits. But let's just go ahead and jump into it here, starting with a question from the TPT that got just over, I think, 4 million impressions a year ago. This is a post from George Stoya. My guess would be Isaiah Hankins. You're talking about the Baylor kicker that's also in the portal, but they haven't had much contact with him. And last I heard, he was on a visit to South Carolina. Sooner Steve 1, I know you've got to be smart with NIL funds, but you and I know we will most likely be in multiple tight games of conference play and probably with Michigan. I think this kicker spot is a huge factor in determining the season record from acceptable, questionable to a huge success. Your thoughts, George Stoya?
Yeah, I answered this question, and there's a couple follow-ups to it. I think what they were asking there is kind of what's the going price range?
Sure.
Like how much should you be willing to spend on a kicker? And I can tell you,
I think George has become like the most the person that has the most knowledge on the kicking portal over the last 48 hours.
I've definitely talked to quite a few people, whether it's Mason Shipley's people or just kicking coaches that know the situation and know kickers in the portal, and the price is higher than you think. And I would say that.
Six figs?
Yes. The top kickers are going for more than six figures, and Mason Shipley is considered the best kicker in the transfer portal in the spring. And I can tell you that Texas offered him quite a bit. OU's working to get in that same range so that maybe they can land him. So, and I agree. I agree that kicker is a very, very important spot for Oklahoma next year. They're going to play in a lot of tight games, so you need somebody reliable. It's just how much are you willing to spend? And I would typically say Oklahoma wouldn't spend, a ton there, but knowing the situation they're in, the guys they have on roster that struggled this spring, and how much Texas is offering this player, I think Oklahoma's trying to get probably offer maybe a little bit more than they typically would for that position.
Sure. And it's going to be interesting because I think that the kicking position is obviously a spot that it's never a problem until it is, right?
Exactly. And you saw it in the spring game. It was kind of an issue, or spring, whatever that was, Crimson Combine at the end.
Yeah, have a little bit of respect for the CC.
They added Austin Welch back in the winter. I don't think he's been great so far. I guess he had an appendicitis at some point during spring, so maybe that played a factor in it. I don't know. Yeah. But Oklahoma certainly, if they miss out on Mason Shipley, don't be surprised if they pursue maybe some other kickers in the portal.
No doubt. I mean, I think
they have to.
I was going to say, it's certainly a position that you need to.
Yeah, I would say it's more of a priority right now than maybe some of the positions that we talked about going into the spring, like a wide receiver or a
Interesting.
cornerback. Like I think it's maybe not the number one. I think tight ends maybe number one priority right now. Kicker's right up there though.
Very interesting. All right, let's continue on. A couple of questions, a bullet-pointed question here in terms of talking about Oklahoma's front office, and really, truly, some pretty good questions just in terms of things that I think a lot of people have frequently asked questions about. Can you clear a few things up? Boomer Matt writes in. Number one, we'll go point by point. How involved is Brent and the position coaches in deciding who they go after and who they pass on?
Yeah, so I think that Brent's pretty involved. It's very much a collaborative thing. But what I will say is, Jim Nagy and Taylor Redd, they're leading the charge. Them and their staff, they're identifying players. They're evaluating them. They're looking at their tape so that the coaches don't have to go through. There's 700 guys, over 700 players in the transfer portal. I would guess that the staff isn't going through all 700. Like They don't have to worry about that. That's up to Nagy's staff. So again, Brent has his input on it, but I think it's mostly up to Nagy and Taylor Redd and the rest of those guys.
And we'll see how Kel Pearson gets involved with that as well, taking over as the director of high school scouting. Number two from Boomer Matt, do you sense that the staff is relieved that some of those responsibilities are off their plate and they can focus on coaching? This is something that we've talked about since, I think basically over the last couple months, just in the formation of this front office and what it has been intended to do and taking some of the workload, I guess you could say, off of the coaches, off of the practice field or the game field.
Definitely. I think they are, mostly relieved that they don't have to, again, go through the film of 700 players and try to identify, a guy and how much maybe they're worth. Like they don't have to think about the numbers and all of that. Nagy and his staff are handling that. So I think they are for the most part relieved by that.
That's good news. I mean, obviously, that's something that we've talked about. It feels like since day one with Brent of taking things off of his plate. Number three, how involved is Nagy and his crew going to be in the high school scouting?
Very. Again, you mentioned it, Kel Pearson, the new director of high school scouting. I think he's going to be kind of leading the charge in terms of identifying players and who they should go after at the high school ranks. That doesn't mean that, if Brent or somebody on his staff, the coaching staff, identifies a high school guy that they really like and they want to go after, they certainly will have that opportunity or have some sort of collaborative effort about, where are they on their priority list.
Sure.
But I do think that Kel Pearson and Jim Nagy, Taylor Redd, they will be identifying, for the most part, the players that they would like to go after.
I think the Kel Pearson hire, just in general, bringing him back to the Sooner State, and he's a guy that he's been the general manager for Air Force, and I know that that's a different set of, or I guess a different demo, if you will, of guys that you're probably recruiting to the Air Force Academy. But at the same time, he has those connections previously established, much like Jim Nagy does with some of the agents out there.
Yeah, he has the like you said, the connections, the relationships, but also just kind of understanding what a roster looks like and managing it. I know Air Force is much different than Oklahoma, but still understanding that and probably valuations, I think, is super important.
I don't know how many fighter pilots Oklahoma has on the roster right now. Maybe that's something we'll ask once the season begins. Number four, what do you think would happen if Nagy says this is not a guy we want and Brent says yes it is, or vice versa? That's something that is yet to play out.
I don't know if we know the answer to that. Yeah,
sure.
I don't know if we know the answer to that. I lean towards Nagy would have a good chunk of the say in that. I think that Nagy was asked this kind of question at his press conference, and he basically said, probably come to some sort of middle ground, find someone in the middle, because there's enough players out there that you can find somebody that everybody likes. Sure. And so I think that would be a part of it. I think also that, Nagy is the GM and he's in charge of building the roster. And I think that he would have, again, I don't know this for sure, but my assumption is that he would maybe have final say on that. And I also think, though, that Brent's pretty collaborative on that stuff. Like, I don't think maybe that situation comes up more often than we think it does, but I don't think it's something that is happening, all the time.
Maybe something that will round about, once they get through this first portal cycle. And I would love to talk to Jim Nagy about it and see how they work through something like that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. Let's continue on with Boomer Matt. Some pretty good questions just in terms of Jim Nagy and the Oklahoma front office. Nagy is getting a lot of credit for landing Ott. I'm sure the coaching staff was involved in that pitch. So do you think any of the coaches are getting pissy with how much credit Nagy gets?
I don't think so. I think they're just happy that they got Jaden Ott.
Sure.
I think that also Nagy deserves a good amount of the credit that he's receiving.
We talked about it on the Unofficial 40. We talked about it on one of the portal reports. I think it's fair to say, at the very least fair to say, that Jaden Ott wouldn't be an Oklahoma Sooner without Jim Nagy.
Correct. And I think that he played a huge part in his recruitment, making sure the deal was ready to go. All of that goes into that. That's not to say that, DeMarco Murray and Ben Arbuckle weren't a part of it, but I do think Jim deserves a good amount of credit, and I don't think anybody's, salty about that. When you get a good player, it doesn't matter who gets the credit.
I just kind of fall back on the idea, too, that a lot of these offensive coaches, I think it's kind of expected, maybe outside of Ben Arbuckle, kind of coaching for your job this year.
Yeah.
To make sure that you come back next year.
And you get a guy like Ott, I'm not sure how you could be upset about that.
If you want to look at the PFF numbers, this is since 2022 for Jaden Ott over the last 3 years while he was at Cal. 90.1 PFF grade, 2,605 rushing yards, 123 missed tackles, forced, and 1,633 yards after contact.
That'll play.
He's an incredible running back. I can't wait to see him in an Oklahoma uniform. All right, one more from Boomer Matt. If you and Josh were to Indian leg wrestle in a best out of 7 match, who wins and what is the win-loss tally?
I said Josh would sweep me.
I mean, have you seen Josh's legs?
Yeah, they're
and he has
huge.
the power of a tattoo on one of them.
Exactly. I don't think I stand a chance in that.
Do you still have a tattoo?
I don't have a tattoo.
I thought you had a tramp stamp.
No, I don't.
All right.
Maybe I
not.
will someday.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe not. I'll tell you what. If OU wins the national championship, we'll both get tattoos. Something very tasteful. How about that?
That sounds good.
I don't know what it would be, but it'd be pretty good. Some of the bad news out of the college football ranks this week, and I think a lot of people acted like Lee Corso died. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But that he did announce he is retiring after week 1 of the 2025 season, likely headed to Ohio State, Texas. I mean, I know that hasn't been announced, but you would imagine. And it's kind of cool how you bookended. I think the first game day that Lee Corso ever did was in Columbus at the Horseshoe for an Ohio State game, which is kind of cool. A couple of responses. As always, everybody has an opinion on the Crimson Corners. Sooner, not a boomer. He's been a Saturday morning staple my entire life, but it's time, thanks to Lee.
I would agree with that. I think that we've all agreed that it's maybe time for him to retire.
Yeah, but at the same time,
I'll miss him.
He's like a Dickie V. I think Big Cat said it best when you go through it, and Carey's telling us to move on. I completely forgot what I was going to say. Ricky Spanish, considering the last couple of seasons, has been a remake of Weekend at Bernie's. I'd say it's a little late, but glad they finally did it, talking about Lee Corso. And then the half yard, it's time, pastime is fair. It was tough to watch, but ESPN did a respectable job in managing the situation and transitioning to Saban. The McAfee deal was to re-grab the bros. The waterworks will be coming for Kirk, and it's understandable. Corso was a big part of the entertainment evolution of college football, and he should be honored as such. And I completely agree. And Lee Corso is just one of those
legend,
guys.
man.
He's like Dickie V. You get to decide when you want to get out.
Yeah, I mean, look, he made College Game Day what it is.
Sure.
It's grown into
I think over the last 2 decades, really the last 20 years, it's become a staple of Saturday morning. You wake up and you want to be in front of the television by 10:50 or whenever.
Tuning in to see who he picks. I know it's like you maybe don't watch the whole show, but you always want to tune in at what is it, 10:58 to see who he picks. And I know OU had a long time where fans didn't want him to pick OU because it was kind of like the Lee Corso curse. So, yeah, he's awesome. And he's got a great I remember, was it OU Texas in like 2011 when he did the gun?
I think so. Or
he's done the gun several times with OU, but the iconic one, I think, was in the Cotton Bowl.
41 times Oklahoma's been on College Game Day. Pretty incredible. And then I believe it was told to me they've been on 18 times. He's picked Oklahoma 11 of those times, and I think they're like 11-7, somewhere around there when Lee Corso picks. So we're going to miss him. And, I think the interesting thing, too, is if you look to week 2, that first week without Lee Corso, I think there's a good chance they are coming to Norman for OU Michigan. That's kind of the only game in that week 2 slate.
Do you think they should stop doing the headgear stuff? That's a Lee Corso thing only?
Yeah, they should stop doing the headgear, but I think that
still do something.
Like they've still installed the
the celebrity guest picker or whatever, and just pick somebody else outside of Blake Shelton, even though me and Blake are good friends. So, all right, let's continue on, because I know that this was a big talking point in the Unofficial 40 this week. We had a big fast food debate. Carey got the ire of a lot of people. Burger King is fantastic, MG Sooner says. I'll be honest. We had Burger King at the Adams dorms when I was in school here at Oklahoma.
It's gross.
I have not eaten it since my freshman year. The double cheeseburger is fantastic. Don't make shit up, replied the great Curry Murdoch. Got some support there with 24 likes. And then George Stoya chimed in, crazy that I was called the fast food snob just for saying Burger King sucks.
That's ridiculous that I was called a snob for that take.
Does Burger King suck?
Yes.
I haven't eaten there.
Neither
in
have I,
long.
but if it was good, I think I would have eaten there.
Thompson Sooner, I'll defend Carey Murdoch here. While I'm not a huge BK fan, it's one of those places that has a bad rep because so many individual BK restaurants are horribly run.
I believe
but
that.
if you can find a BK with good management employees, it can be pretty good. A lot of fast food places are like this. Kansas City just got a few Whataburgers, and I've had horrible experiences every time I've gone. I've never had a bad experience at Whataburger in Oklahoma or Texas, though. That's because the Burger Kings or the Whataburgers in Oklahoma and Texas are probably efficiently run.
Carey won't tell you that, though.
Carey would disagree with you. Chainsaw Massacre, want to go eat something, pretty good meme here, making use of his own meme generator, I'm sure. I might have to get by Burger King, give it another run. It's just been so long. I just never think about it, and there's not really one by us downtown Oklahoma City.
There's a reason.
I think there's one on 23rd Street. Big J, 22,490. Carey single-handedly keeping them afloat. Maybe it's just a old beat writer thing. I know that there's a lot of Burger King.
Yeah, there's a big Burger King
tentacles, if you will, within the Oklahoma beat. All right, we'll continue on, get back to some of the football stuff. Let's talk Mason Shipley, the Texas State kicker. He visited Oklahoma on Thursday. This question for the great George Stoya, just in terms of general booty. So it took hiring Nagy for the coaches to officially end the negligent practice of indiscriminately sourcing players from Western Kentucky. George.
Yeah, well, first of all, I should say that the kicker from Western Kentucky back in the winter portal, I know that's not who they were referring to, was actually extremely good. Ended up at Ole Miss.
Yeah,
but,
he was a Lou Groza finalist, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, he is legit. And no, but I think that their point there is valid to an extent. You know, like we've said, that I think that the organization, the vision of what Jim Nagy and the staff are trying to do in the portal is very clear. And I think that, you know, in the short few months that Jim has been on campus, he's evaluated the OU roster and has found some holes.
Sure.
And I think kicker's one of them. I think running back was a spot that he felt like that room could get a lot better. Tight end, obviously, interior offensive line with Jake Mikhailo. So I think that you're definitely seeing a little bit more organization. I'm curious what it looks like next winter, because the spring is only a taste, right? Like they may end up only, you know, adding a few guys. What does the winter portal look like next year? And, you know, largely it depends on how the season goes, I'm sure. But I think it is interesting to see how this front office staff has maybe approached it versus what Oklahoma was doing previously.
As we get to the late afternoon hours here on Friday, what is the latest with Mason Shipley?
I think that he's coming close to a decision. I think it's going to be OU or Texas. You know, Texas is very confident. You know, in fact, I think that, you know, maybe this is somewhat of like a Jaden Ott situation where they were waiting for him to get into the portal, made him a very attractive offer. You know, I think Texas thought it was a done deal. I think Texas was a little thrown off that he took this Oklahoma visit. And now I think Mason is considering both options. Texas has offered more money. I know that for a fact. I think OU's trying to get a little bit more money to offer him because they really want him. So we kind of have to wait and see how it plays out. If you told me by the time this video publishes that Mason has made an announcement, that wouldn't shock me. If it also takes, you know, through the weekend, that also wouldn't shock me. So I think it's kind of a just, you know, keep your eyes peeled, you know, put them on notifications if you want to on, you know, social media. But OU's trying. They're definitely, you know, and this is a much closer race than I think a lot of people over, you know, down in Austin would tell you. I think there's you know, some people in Mason's circle and Mason specifically too that really liked Oklahoma, and OU gave him a lot to think about on Thursday.
Doug Deacon certainly must have impressed him. It will be interesting to see what happens. Mason Shipley, obviously 31 of 35 over the last couple years. Or was that last year or just
I think it's actually the last 2 years.
Or the last 2 years. He was a Lou Groza semifinalist in 2023, one of the better kickers.
Career long of 60.
In the portal right now. All right, let's final one. Let's talk about the cornerback position, which was a high priority, or we thought it was going to be a priority for Oklahoma. I think Big A. Lou 28 or Big Al OU 28. I think that's probably what it is. I think another good corner across from Eli may be the difference between another top 15, 20 defense and a top 5 unit.
Yeah, so what I understand from corner is they would like to add one. I just don't think it's as high of a priority as maybe tight end and kicker is right now, and that's where the money's going. And OU doesn't have unlimited funds, right? Like, I think Oklahoma, there's this narrative that they're poor. That's certainly not the case. They don't land, Jaden Ott or Jake McKayla if they are poor, but they don't have, Texas or Ohio State, Oregon type of money. And so I think that they have priorities right now. And if on the back end they come up with some money suddenly appears for them, and I know they're working, they're back channeling right now to try and figure out how they can get some more money. I think cornerback would be a spot that they try to add. Wide receiver, which we've talked about. I think they like both of those rooms overall. They love the young talent in the corner room, and they think one of those guys is going to step up and be a player for them. They'd still like to add a veteran guy, but some of the prices, like wide receiver, corner comes at a premium a lot of times, and sometimes they're overvalued in the transfer portal. And I would also say there's only been maybe one or two guys enter. The Houston corner that entered today is certainly intriguing. I think a lot of big schools will be after him. Other than that, there's only maybe been one or two guys that have entered that really I think Oklahoma would be actually interested in.
I know we've said it a couple times here now, but Davon Jordan had a pretty good spring, and I thought it was just eye-opening how much run he got. I know it was in the very limited, time of the Crimson Combine,
and look, if you have Gentry Williams healthy, then you're probably not taking a corner.
Sure.
And I think right now that's their thought is like, well, if Gentry's healthy, that's great. The problem is you can't count on that,
right.
And so they're looking to see if they can't get a veteran guy kind of like Gentry that's played a lot of football. But if you went into the season, you said you have Eli Bowen, Gentry Williams, Jacoby Johnson, all healthy, and they're all going to be healthy throughout the season. That's a pretty good, threesome of corners. And you add in maybe a Kendall Dolby moving outside. I think that Oklahoma likes that. Again, if you could just get, one more guy with some experience, I think Oklahoma would like to do that.
3 days in, I'm sure there's going to be some more twists and turns to the transfer portal, and we'll be tracking it through the weekend and be on the Crimson Corner as well as here in studio if needed. All right, for George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you here next time for another Around the Corner on SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.